Hello and welcome to Doubles and Trebles. I've got Matt Pieman here with me, Adam Smido Smith as usual. We're here to talk about the European Championship action that took place just over the weekend at the end of October. 3 days live on the telly, plenty going on, pretty short format, plenty of excellent games, massive averages, massive 180s. Pieman, I loved it and it really does. We've said this many times, but now we are into busy season on the darts calendar.
Yeah, whets the appetite for what's to come, doesn't it? And a new major winner. I know you wouldn't call this a major, but I would. By the technical description, we do have to call it a major. It's a TV terrestrial tournament outside of the Euro Tour and stuff. And look, it was a very strong field. You can't dispute that. We could debate all night whether or not it's a major, whether it quantifies as a major. The PDC will class it as a major, and Russ Smith has added himself in an unlikely fashion to the reel of major winners. Ross Smith, someone who I have backed for countless TV tournaments in the last year and obviously deserted for the European Championship, but I was delighted to see Ross successful. And we may as well start with Ross Smith. I know you were really impressed with the way he went about his business.
Or easily the best we've ever seen in Pieman, easily. Ross Smith beating Michael Smith in a deja vu type final, if you ask me, particularly for Bully Boy, who we've seen in many finals. You don't need me to reel off how many finals on TV Michael Smith has lost, but it was never close enough in the final to really be in it. We've seen him go behind in finals before, 3 sets behind to Van Gerwen one year, and then reeled off 2 or 3 himself. But he's just always too far behind from early doors to get into the real business end and force deciding legs, deciding sets, and that was what happened here. 11-8 to Ross Smith in the end, his first TV final, averaging 101 in a 19-leg game, particularly when it's his first big final, is really something that he deserves a lot of credit for. Michael Smith averaging a tad over 100 as well. But it's the best we've seen from Ross Smith. Absolutely no doubt about it. No question at all. Fantastic finishing throughout the tournament. Really was. I think he was the best finisher statistically through the tournament. Michael Smith going into the final was actually the second best. But he just had the inevitable feeling about Ross Smith when he's on his combo finishes, in the 2 dart range, in the 70 to 90 kind of range. It just felt inevitable at times. You could see opponents in multiple games just standing at the behind, just being chipped away at when Ross Smith coming to the board and taking out 86 and 91 and 75 or whatever it may be. In multiple games that happened, and in the final itself as well. In the semi-final, which I'm sure you're going to come on to, Pieman, it's quarter-final to come on to as well. But in the semi-final, he beat Chris Dobey in a similar fashion to how we beat Michael Smith in the final. Just edged in front early doors and stayed there. A massive credit to himself. He had a quiet start to the year, let's say. Some problems off the board, but he's obviously put them to bed. Spoke really well in the interview after, and I think if I remember rightly, Pieman, you interviewed our friend Damon Hetter in the middle of the year, June time-ish, and I'm sure he made a comment to you, possibly off camera, about Ross Smith was back. He was or back to his best, or was going to do something, and God, was he right.
Well, yeah, he said that him and Ross had been hitting the practice board extremely hard. I think there was a Euro Tour that they both didn't qualify for, and they just met up for the weekend and just absolutely smashed the practice board to pieces. And Ross Smith, like you say, I mean, look, start of the year, or maybe even the start of last year now, we put him up as a player to watch in the year. He was one of my 5 players to watch, and I gave the reasons that I thought he was a player who, even though he'd had his tour card for a long time, I thought he was like a player reborn. And then he had this huge lull, as you quite rightly point out, in the early Players' Championships, first half of the year, where he was just a non-runner really in a lot of these tournaments, going out first round, second round. That was in complete contrast to the Ross Smith we'd seen last year, who was making quarterfinals, semi-finals, and taking all kinds of scalps. I'm on record saying it. I think maybe even on our last darts video that I think Ross Smith's throw and rhythm is as good as anybody when he's on. And Ross Smith is a very analytical guy. He's very self-critical about his game, and he's always said that he has the belief that he can do something. And I think he's very level-headed. He says that consistency is what makes the difference at the top level. He reckons, and I totally agree with this, there are 40 or 50 players capable of beating the other 40 or 50 players, but it's the ones at the top that produce that top level regularly, and you can hang your hat on them. And Ross Smith wants to become one of those players now. He's gone away. He's worked really hard on his finishing, by his own admission. He said after the World Grand Prix, he felt like he was ready to do something special. And I looked at the comments underneath that social media post, and it was a lot of people taking the mick out of him. And I imagine he's got a wry smile on his face now. And you know, he always handles himself very well, Ross. He was straight in to talk about Michael Smith straight after the final, how brilliantly he played. You're quite right. Michael Smith did not bottle that final. Even someone like myself, who's been quite critical of him in finals in the past, I think you are, you know, I know that you feel the same way with this, where he just seems to be approaching things differently now, Smith. He's not getting too hard on himself, not putting himself down when he doesn't win these finals, saying, I know it'll come eventually if I keep doing what I can. And there are obviously a lot of examples of that happening in darts and in sport generally, where you do have to be the bridesmaid quite a lot of time sometimes before you get that first win, and then the floodgates can sometimes open. The thing with Ross Smith, and I think this was a pivotal moment that they kept overlooking on the ITV coverage. They were talking about him going 4-0 down to Peter Wright in the quarterfinal and then making it 4-1, and how that was a turning point. What they didn't seem to recall was he was 8-3 down, and Peter Wright started messing around on silly doubles that he didn't need to. In a leg, he was about 150 points clearing, and he missed darts at 5-5, 3-3, and 1-1, and Smith nicked the leg to go 8-4. At the time, seemed insignificant. Little did we know he was going to reel off 7 straight legs and win 10-8. Uncharacteristic from Wright to go off the boy like that. He's not a player that you would associate with that. But the confidence that Smith took from that turnaround, he took it into the game with Chris Dobey, which I think most people would say was a pick-em, really. Two very talented players who don't make the latter stages of TV events. It was just going to be who held themselves together the best. Smith held himself together the best. And then against Michael Smith, he didn't bother getting into any of the bravado about will Michael Smith turn up, will he not? He just focused on his own game, and it was so impressive. You know, the question now is, will this have a Johnny Clayton-like effect on Ross Smith's career, where suddenly he can compete at that top level every week? For some reason, people don't seem to feel as strongly that this is going to be the start of a glittering run for Ross Smith. But I don't think he'll care about that. I don't think he's the kind of character to care what other people think. Great moment for him. I saw his wife was there in the crowd, who's been a rock support for him throughout his career. So really special moment for him. And yeah, a fitting end to a great tournament for me.
Well, he's 80-1, Pieman, to win the World Championship, Ross Smith, and that's something that's going to be on our agenda in most videos we talk about. Just on Michael Smith, he's lost another final. You don't need me or Pieman to list those finals to you. It's an ongoing talking point in darts. We've done a video on it specifically on this channel. But as you've already said, he didn't do a lot wrong, really, in the final. He won the best game of the tournament in the semi-final against Big Dirk van Duijvenbode, averaging 103 over 18 legs. He's averaged just over 100 in a 19-leg final. I actually think Smith has moved on from beating himself up over losses like this on the big stage. I genuinely do. You've alluded to it earlier, just his general attitude. And I think we saw it at the World Championships. Was it last year where he beat Gerwen Price and there was none of the shaking the head, or it was just all game? There was no kind of emotion. It is double, collect the darts, set again. I think he's sticking to that pretty much. And I think he knows he's doing the right thing. He's been to finals and done the wrong thing, put too much pressure on himself, shaking his head, as I mentioned. But I think he knows he's doing the right thing, and it will come eventually. He's making finals pretty regularly. He's doing quite a lot right. And look how many times the likes of Snake lost in finals, particularly to MVG. Some taking defeat from the brink of victory. And before breaking that trend and really kicking on. And let's not forget, I think he's won 2 Pro Tour finals this year, and he's won 2 or 3 of the Euro Invitational thingy.
And one in Vegas as well, the US Darts Masters.
He has won tournaments, just maybe not TV ones, and Twitter obviously goes off and saying the things that we don't particularly agree with. But that's for Michael Smith. Before we move on from the Smiths, Pieman, talk to me about that quarter final where he was coming. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. 8-3 down to come back, and superb stuff. I mean, you don't see the world champion losing 8 legs on the bounce in quarterfinals on TVs very often.
No, well, the averages ended up in that game with Wright at 96 and Ross Smith at 95. So it looks like a tightly run race, but really it was a game of a complete two halves. As I touched on briefly, 4-0 down, Smith out the traps, and Nick, it should have been 5-0, nicked it back to 4-1, but he really was just clinging on for large swathes of it. And Wright was playing really, really well. And to be honest, at that point, I thought Peter Wright's name was all over this trophy. It just looked like one of them tournaments that happens every couple of months, where Peter Wright just casually creeps into the quarterfinals and then destroys everyone in the last 2 or 3 games. And you think,
100% agree. Yeah.
That was a bit of a non-event.
Particularly with the MVG and Price going out first round.
Well, exactly. It always had that open look to it, didn't it? And you're looking at these players, you're looking at your Ross Smiths, Chris Dobey's, thinking, is this their time? And then you think, nah, Peter Wright's still there. He'll probably just roll through and win it. But as I said before, it wasn't, I mean, credit to Ross Smith. He hung in there at the end of the game. He was brilliant. But I thought Peter Wright threw that away really uncharacteristically, messing around, changing darts mid-game again. What is he doing? 4-1 up, he changed his darts. And it went back to 4-4, 4-3, and then he changed them again. And it's just like, oh, God, it just adds another layer where he doesn't need to do it. But look, who am I to criticise a world champion? It was bizarre to watch from Wright's perspective, and he gave Smith hope, with the silly way he went about his doubling and stuff, and then he went off the boil himself. I think he realised that Ross Smith was getting up ahead of steam, and by that point, it was kind of too late. Even at 8-all, yes, it's 8-all, but when one player's won 5 consecutive legs, it doesn't feel like 8-all. It feels like they're steamrolling to the finishing line. And yeah, it was just really uncharacteristic from Peter Wright. I don't expect it to bother him. I think he'll shake it off. He's someone who spoke highly of Ross Smith in the past as well. So I think he'll have been, he'll probably put that down to Ross Smith showing some good character. But yeah, unusual. You don't normally see that kind of collapse from Wright, MVG or Price. But very uncharacteristic from them. Were there any other players that caught your eye in this tournament? I mean, I also thought Luke Humphries was looking very good until he bumped into Michael Smith.
Oh, fine, man. I only had one bet. I think I put it in the comments actually last week to one of the guys. We both fancied Humphries. I know you had a couple of other bets. I only had one bet, Humphries. I was out on Sunday or whenever it was, came back, turned on. I think I texted you. I said, I've just turned on. Humphries a double break up in the quarter final. He was winning 6-3 on a double break, got broke in that very leg. So yeah, I turned on, and I think Luke Humphries went on to lose 7 of the 8 legs played since I was watching. And it was just a capitulation. Really quite disappointing. I've had my eye on Luke Humphries for some time with an eye to the Worlds, and I was hoping that between when we was talking about him, say June, and the Worlds, he would go on and go deep in one of these tournaments on TV. He is yet to do that, and he's only got 2 more opportunities to do that for the rest of the year. That's a negative one. A positive one, Chris Dobey, got to have a shout out from him. It'd be MVG, Jose and Chisnell before losing in the semi to the eventual winners. 180s galore. I think he broke the record, or at least equaled it, for number of 180s in a single game in this tournament. So hats off to Chris Dobey. But the big question always with Chris Dobey, and he isn't a youngster anymore, is can he kick on from this point on? And from evidence, what I've seen so far in his career, when he has done this, he's done well at Ali Pali before, but doesn't kick on after that. And I want to see him do it.
Yeah, and I think he's spoken about, setting himself that goal of kicking on to the next level now, making semi-finals and finals, getting into that top 16, which he looks like he's primed to do. So I really would like to see him kick on. I mean, he's been a player that we've had in the past on the shortlist for Players' Championships because the levels he can hit, he's right up there with all of them. And great for him to get that monkey off his back in beating MVG, because he had one of the worst head-to-head records in darts. I think he was something like 0-11 against MVG in his career. And, he was playing so well in that game, far the better player. And when it went to 5-all, I thought, oh, he's chucked it again. I think Van Gerwen had the darts in the last leg, but he produced back-to-back 180s in the deciding leg to get over the line. And like you say, that was the catalyst for a really good tournament for him, beating Jose, and I think more impressively beating Chizzy, because Chizzy's in really good form.
Oh, yeah.
Chizzy's doing this thing that he does where it's like you're watching one game, you think, good God, he could win the Worlds. And then the next game, he's absolutely, well, not even atrocious. He just finds a way to lose sometimes, Chiz.
And his action, Pieman, I know we're not to pick holes in because he has been playing well. But when he's not playing well, it's more pronounced. His action is getting worse with age. It really, particularly that last start, his back legs coming off, he's throwing it over to the side. It looks awful, but he has been making it pay in recent weeks, as we know.
Well, it's not out of the coaching manual, but I mean, the darts he was playing in Hungary were out of this world. I mean, he won the Players' Championship 25, beating Rock in the final, where I think he broke the record on that day for 180s in the Players' Championship.
30 odd, yeah.
Then he averaged 107 in sweeping Stephen Bunting in the first round 6-0 here, beat Johnny Clayton in the next round. So, I mean, like, there are definite signs of Chiz being primed to do something at Ali Pali or at the Grand Slam, but there comes a point with players where you just have to draw a line through them in terms of outright winner, don't they? And Chiz, look, I'd be delighted to see Chiz win a tournament. He doesn't need to have money on his back to share that delight. He deserves a big tournament, but he's got to go and do it, hasn't he? He almost, a bit like Michael Smith, it could definitely happen, but I don't know when, and I'm not going to keep paying to find out, Josh Rock is someone we've touched about on an individual video, but he was outstanding, the way he went about it in the first round against Aspinall. Very unlucky to lose to eventual finalist Michael Smith. And yeah, the real story of this tournament, I suppose, was the exits of Van Gerwen and Gerwyn Price in the first round. And for me, a couple of concerning signs around Gerwyn Price recently. He looked in such good form in the summer, and we both alluded to what good nick he appeared to be coming into. But now just a couple of surprising losses in recent weeks. Would like to see him bounce back with a strong Grand Slam showing, ideally semi-finals or the final. And God, you'd be a brave man to write him off going and doing that, wouldn't you?
Well, Pieman, you could argue that I have already wrote him off on a previous video, making the biggest statement ever on doubles and trebles when I said before the Grand Prix that Gerwyn Price might not ever win a major again, and then 9 days later he made the final. So to this point, I have been proven right. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to give you 3 names now, Pieman, that have disappointed me not only in this tournament but across the year. You might want to touch on all 3 of them. The problem is there's that many good players at the top of the list. The top 20 could all win a tournament on any given weekend, as we've seen here. Ross Smith probably on the lower end of that 20, but you've got Dirk van Duijvenbode knocking on the door. Michael Smith, obviously we know about him and making finals. So there's so many decent players, but I have been disappointed, and obviously they've all got different reasons for it. Jose hasn't done it on the TV tournament for a long time. We're talking over a year. Johnny Clayton has been mentioned on this channel as doing not enough for me in 2022. This time last year, you were all over him at prices from 50 to 1 downwards, and he was one of the favourites going into the Worlds. He won't be this year on this form. And finally, Dimitri van den Bergh, who's still got it. He's probably played the best of those 3 this year, in my opinion, but he's just finding ways of not winning games and coming unstuck. And, he's very methodical for me, Pieman. You know my opinions on him, but it's not a slight on him. Whatever he has to do to win darts games, but he's just not winning enough games for me. If you see what I mean, he's averaged 101 first round, won, and then he's averaged 100 and lost to the eventual winner, Ross Smith. But just not winning enough games relative to the price he's going off at 10, 12, 14 to 1 every tournament. Any comment on those 3?
Well, yeah, I'll start with Dimitri. I mean, you're totally right. Other than winning a World Series event, and I think he won 1 Euro Tour as well, he's had some shocking results. Gone out very early in the Euro Tour, not really done anything of note in the majors. His Pro Tour
in the Players'
His Pro Tour performances are abysmal. Awful. He's going off 3rd favourite, 4th favourite every day, and he's frequently going out in the first round. I mean, it's not even an eye raiser when he goes out in the first round anymore. He's a conundrum, isn't he? Because he's got the game. We know he's a major winner when he's playing well. His Ali Pali record is exemplary, so I would give him the benefit of the doubt with regards to the Worlds. But God, you wouldn't have any confidence. You wouldn't put him up as a potential winner, would you? On the form, definitely not. Jose, as we've touched on, he's had some problems away from the hockey, and for all of, I was delighted to see Chris Dobey doing well. A little bit gutted when I retrospectively realised that Dobey's win over Van Gerwen had denied us Van Gerwen versus Jose. This is after Van Gerwen called Jose Mr. Big Bollocks in his little rant. I don't know
Live
if you
on
saw it on the
stage,
Euro Tour on the live interview where he kind of slated Jose really out of the blue for having a bit of a chip on his shoulder the way he goes. I mean, certainly not how he comes across to the general public, but these things do go on off the stage. Let's hope them two draw each other at Ali Pali. But no, Jose definitely a shadow of where he has been. Let's hope he can get back to that. And I actually
on Jose, sorry, Pieman.
Go on.
On Jose, he's borderline flash in the pan. COVID flash in the pan.
Yeah.
He's borderline that.
He is. I mean, I'm giving him benefit of the doubt here. He's averaged 105 in the first round in demolishing Martin Schindler, and then he's bounced into Chris Dobey, who could have easily won the tournament the way he was playing. So I'm happy to give him a wide berth there. But you're right. I mean, as the results stack up, as the lack of quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals stack up, you will get more and more people saying, "Was he just a one-year wonder kind of thing?" And let's hope not, because he's a real character and he's a serial 180 hitter, isn't he, on his day? And he's a joy to watch when he's playing well, and a nice guy too, unless you're Michael van Gerwen, of course. Clayton, again, give him a wide berth losing to Chirs, who I think is in fine form, but there's no doubt he's not where he was 12 months ago, and I don't think you could be putting him up for the Worlds at 14-1. Look at some of the players around him. God, you'd have got some funny looks at the start of the year suggesting that he was going to go off the same price as a Luke Humphries or but he's going into that 16-1 category, isn't he? And it's, unfortunately, I'm a massive Ferret fan, but it's where he deserves to be.
Yeah, last year we were talking about there being a big 4 at the top of the market. Now it is well and truly back to 3. Johnny Clayton has fell into that second section there, but I think you'd have to say that you'd have to be, just on the matter of the odds, more disappointed with Clayton and Vandenberg of the 3 we spoke about, because they are 14 and 12-1 for the Worlds. Jose at the moment for the Worlds is 80.
Yeah.
So that's the correct price on what we've just spoke about, and the other 2 maybe they're priced up on reputation, and they have obviously won majors rather than actual form. But no doubt we'll cover that on another video. That's general darts chat and European Championship review there, covered all sorts of different players. We've got a Josh Rock video that we need everybody to check out, the talking man at the moment, and we'll be back with plenty more darting content on doubles and trebles.